And now, so I'm really excited to welcome Megan Smith back up to the stage. Oh, wonderful, thank you. So everyone, obviously, we've all had a chance to listen to Megan a little bit earlier. I asked if she could come and speak in every single WeWork all over the world. So we'll see if she's got time later this year. But we'll hop right into it. I think one of the things that that's really interesting about your background and about what you said today is, you know, you work in technology, you work in companies that have defined at Google, and then as within the government, really thinking, people probably look at you and say, wow, this is someone who's focused on technology, but everything you talk about is about humans. You're really focused on developing talent and people. Can you just walk us through, like, how did you develop that philosophy? What in your life kind of led you to that kind of outcome?
Sure, yeah, and sometimes I think about it as like, I mean, what would it be like if everybody felt that level of creative confidence that some people are feeling and executing on the topics that are interesting to them, right? So what would they be doing? What would the world look like? That's a pretty exciting world that I'd like to be in. I grew up with a lot of entrepreneurs around me that were sort of not the classic entrepreneurs. My mom was a teacher, and my father was working on many different things, including housing. But they were doing things in Buffalo where we grew up, like starting the recycling center, starting the bike routes, you know, in the 70s. And being very involved in critical mass and all that stuff. It's not new, we saw it last time. But in sort of the inclusion and rights and the schools. And so we got sort of a civics, entrepreneurship, education. Also, the lawsuits were live at Buffalo to try to get the schools more integrated. And so our school was founded as a set of magnet schools. That were great, and so our teachers got to create our school, so we were around that environment. That's cool. No money, but fabulous rock star innovators. And for me, we had mandatory science fair, and that made us all have to do tech things, which I probably would have not done. But because we were required, Jimmy Carter was putting solar panels on the White House. We faced a grave energy crisis. People remember that. Someone recently found them, and they're at like Bates College or something. But that was an amazing time, and so we were required to do these projects, and it had to be new. So I thought, okay, well, I'll work on some of this green energy stuff. It's nice to be in Denver for a bunch of different reasons. One is because when I was in high school, the Boulder team sent out a bunch of things for NSF, solar energy and energy engineering. We got to go up there as high schoolers and learn what we were doing was engineering. Yeah. Also, my parents met in Denver. I wouldn't be here without Denver.
Oh, nice.
So I think
more pandering for Denver.
Yeah. But I think that this exposure, like the little kids in my slides who are like kindergartners doing brainstorming and prototyping, that we have these bells ringing between our subjects at school, and we somehow think they're separated. Yeah. Right? And so for me, I think a key thing was to not be pushed away from math and science and understand it was a purposeful thing. And then just seeing what talent would do if it gets the chance, what teams will do.
So that's that piece on what talent would do. What's really interesting that what you kept saying is like everyone is awesome, which I thought was like a really beautiful, simple way of saying that. So you also talk about like radical inclusion. Mm-hmm. So when you spoke to us, there were a lot of, you showed a lot of examples of, you know, Chattanooga is just, you know, probably a few hundred miles away or something where it isn't being as uplifted. But how at a, because I think one of the things that's interesting is that we're faced with a time pressure right now. How do you drive radical inclusion in technology rapidly in a city like Denver and then across the country? What are you seeing that works, and if you could snap your fingers?
Yeah, who's doing that really well? One thing, the word radical inclusion, General Dempsey has a new book out there based on some work that we and some others worked on with him, and you're making me think of that. And it was when we were fighting ISIL. So ISIL, if you think about ISIL and Al-Qaeda and these guys, this is open systems terror, right? Do something. It's open systems. So this idea of open systems can be weaponized or can be used for the positive. In the case of, at the height of ISIL, they were basically this incredible media company not unlike the Hitler propaganda against the youth, right? Recruiting our young people and getting these foreign fighters to come. They'd come, and so we started analyzing the shopping baskets and like what is happening in the stealing of our children and our young people around the world. They're picking you up in this Twitter feed, and then they're like, let's go to a Skype channel, and then they're talking to you, and then they're like, pretty soon you're on a plane, right? And what is going on there? And the poor State Department was tweeting at terrorists. And the Foreign Service officers. So what we started to do was get teams to YouTube, other kinds of folks, show up in the State Department and do a sprint together for 3 weeks. Not a big project of how we're going to redesign ourselves, and a year later, you know, it was like, I'm going to interview you, then I'm going to interview you, then I'm going to interview you, and then I'm going to write it up in a deck. It's exhausting for everybody. But no, we're going to sit at a table and also notice that Americans who built a lot of the stuff that they're working on are in our country, and they could get over here and help us right now. Yeah. And so sort of put the teammates at the table, what President Obama had done with us. Just like a Surgeon General, he realized he needed a tech person, so he added a chair which was missing and shoved us in it. Yeah. And we were able to kind of blast the door open and start to bring, Robin will be up here next, you know, the 18F team, the U.S. Digital Services team. So I think that we were able to change how they were doing it, and it was about lifting other voices instead of direct front, and that's what the resolution of that. But similarly in the cities, we're seeing where unusual teammates come together, that's when they're making the most progress. Yeah. And so Tech Hire was a good example, which wasn't a government program. It was just noticing that the boot camp people were over here with alternative training. The companies were wanting more people, and Delaware had figured out how to jam for that. And, you know, St. Louis had the boot camps, and over here was the mayors, and we didn't know what they would do, but Louisville had figured out Code Louisville, and a whole bunch of techies were over there, and no one could see them. We just said, how about everybody just come meet? Yeah. And start talking to each other, and we got first a couple cities. They workshopped, we understood it, then we went to 20. And then we went to 30, 40, 50, 70 cities. Then in a community of practice, of course we wrote a playbook, but that wasn't it, because that's just a piece of paper. Yeah. What you really need is that you all know you all, that we know each other from all our cities, and we can pick up the phone or be on an email or do a conference call, rapidly sharing. Yeah.
This wasn't one of the questions I was planning on asking you, but so on this kind of strange teammates, one of the things that I think is really interesting that you pointed out in your slides was showing how much more polarized politics has gotten over the last 50 years. And one of the things that's so uplifting about what you showed us is that it's people solving locally using technology to uplift and kind of drive hope and connect communities. To what extent do you think that this next, you talk about the like, there's the chunk of stuff that people think is technology, and then all of the rest of industry and business that also needs technology to kind of be brought up. To what extent do you think that tackling these problems together actually might be the way to reconnect communities and solve that political problem?
Yeah, very much. So I think getting people working on what they care about, what they're worried about in cross-functional teams, and also having a design thinking perspective, which is nothing about us without us. Yeah. So if you're doing something on behalf of someone, go find them and get them at your table and do it with them. And in fact, often you can scout and scale and go look in that group and find an innovator who, instead of the program you're trying to think of what would help, instead you're like, oh, you did that? You did that? Oh, why don't I like help you like a VC? And then it's astonishing, because then not only do I not have to do it, like you're the entrepreneurs. I did so many acquisitions at Google, I think like entrepreneurs are almost genetically going to do what they do, right? Yeah. It's just in them, right? It's awesome. And so if you can find people on any topic doing their thing and help them do it, then you could solve a lot. And then connect those different innovators across. That's a really good way to move.
And we're over time, but I want to ask one final question. You talk a lot about like finding that like Polar Express money, and I think that's really valuable.
Yeah, so, Pony Express.
Yeah, Pony Express. Sorry. Polar Express money is a completely different set of money.
I love the Pony
Express. That's like the Pixar money. But so for folks in this room who probably are already working on something, looking to how to scale it and wondering like they're going to reinvent the wheel, walk us through how to find the Pony Express money.
Yeah, so Pony Express just is referring, like, we love the Pony Express, right? It delivers mail. And but the thing that's interesting is that it was disrupted in 18 months. And so it delivers the mail in 3 days. It gets there. A lot of our programs that we're running now are still Pony Express-ish. They could be so much faster, but we think that's some other thing, and yet it's right next door, like the Chattanooga McDonald example. And so we would look around for what I kind of nicknamed the Pony Express budgets. The budget that was live and well and meant for the thing you were working on, it just was a bit rusty, and you could upgrade. And a perfect example is this tech car one, where we had Katie Burke. Ryan Katie Burke was in the White House working on tech hires. She was National Economic Council. She talked to the Department of Labor and asked them what budgets were available for training Americans that they knew of that were already live and getting grants, and the cities were applying. And there was a $150 million budget that we were able to tell these 70 tech hire cities about. And they packaged up proposal grants and blasted them in, and the Department of Labor saw this huge influx of fabulous potential programs they could fund, and they funded 39 of them. Albuquerque, for example, $3.9 million, focusing on helping bring veterans, recently aged out foster care kids, folks with disability, single parents, who else? People coming out of prison, this incredible group of people who want to get those cool tech jobs, but they didn't know that they could have a 3-month training course, like a Flatiron kind of Turing program, and this was a way to track them in. And it was really good, and they just started flowing this. In Albuquerque, and there were, 38 other cities who tapped that money. Yeah. So it isn't always new money that you need. It's sort of looking around with the budget teams. The budget's your friend, sometimes even though it feels like it's not. We are the richest thing in the world, the American government. We really are. Like, we have plenty of money. We just need to dust it off in new ways and remove it in the new ways and use the data sets that we have. Don't make all of our agencies make apps, for copying what's out in the commercial sector, but get their APIs and their engagement going. And just like our maps that we use to get here, which is U.S. Geological Survey underneath, and beautifully above it is Esri and Google and Bing. Couldn't we have apps on top of human, health and human services, foster care apps, and all these things that the government services can do, and build out that in that way and really solve a lot of problems together? So it's pretty fun to work on. And just including the high schoolers and the college kids in everything you do, I think is also just a key move.
I love it. Well, thank you. Well, I got to get off stage.
Okay.
You're inspiring. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you. Thanks, Padden.